In the spring of 1232, the Mongol army closed around Kaifeng, capital of the Jurchen Jin dynasty. Siege engines moved toward the walls, trenches cut through the earth, and defenders watched an empire tighten its grip around their city. Then, according to the official history of the Jin, iron containers filled with a fiery compound were hurled from the defenses. When they burst, the chronicler compared their sound to thunder. The defenders called them Jintin Lei, heaven-shaking thunder. The same account describes fire lances that projected flame toward anyone who came too close. This was China in the 13th century, bombs overhead, burning weapons at the wall, and military engineers experimenting with the force of a substance first known as huyao, the fire drug. Yet a remarkably persistent story says that China invented gunpowder and somehow failed to understand its military use. According to that story, the Chinese made fireworks, Europe made weapons. But if that were true, what exactly exploded over Kaifeng? The problem begins with the word gunpowder. To a modern listener, it seems to point directly toward a gun, a metal barrel, a projectile, an ignition system, and enough pressure to send that projectile toward a target. But gunpowder existed before the gun, and its first military roles did not depend on a barrel at all. It could carry flame, produce smoke, ignite equipment, frighten men and animals, or burst from a container. Those were not failed attempts at building a musket. They were weapons designed for the battlefields and siege conditions of their own time. We also need to separate 5 different achievements: discovering a chemical mixture, turning it into a weapon, producing that weapon reliably, manufacturing it at scale, and integrating it into tactics. No civilization completed all 5 in a single moment. China's gunpowder story unfolded across centuries, through alchemists, officials, artisans, soldiers, siege engineers, and rival states. The question, then, is not whether China knew how to use gunpowder in war. The evidence makes that answer clear. The real question is how fire became explosion, how explosion became propulsion, and why that revolution took a different shape at opposite ends of Eurasia. That distinction matters because weapons never exist alone. A brilliant device that cannot be supplied, repaired, transported, or taught to ordinary soldiers may remain a curiosity. A less spectacular weapon can become historically important if a government can obtain its ingredients, organize workshops, issue instructions, and fit it beside weapons that troops already understand. Gunpowder therefore entered an existing military world rather than replacing it. It had to work beside the bow, crossbow, spear, shield, cavalry horse, warship, fortress, and trebuchet. Its earliest success should be measured not by whether it resembled a modern rifle, but by whether commanders found tasks it could perform better than the tools already available. The trail begins not in an arsenal, but in the world of Chinese alchemy. For centuries, experimenters heated minerals, salts, plants, oils, and metals while searching for transformations of the body and matter. Saltpeter and sulfur were valuable within that tradition long before anyone built a cannon. A text usually dated to the late-Tang period warns of a mixture containing sulfur, saltpeter, and a carbon-rich material that produced smoke and flame, burning hands, faces, and even the building where the experiment took place. It is an extraordinary warning, but it is not an inventor's certificate. Popular retellings often compress this history into a single irony: men searching for immortality accidentally invented a substance that would kill millions. The line is memorable, but the evidence is less theatrical. We do not know the name of the first person to make gunpowder, the precise year it happened, or whether one accident deserves to be called the invention. What we can see is a long culture of material experimentation gradually revealing how an oxidizer, fuel, and sulfur behave together. Even then, a mixture that burns fiercely is not automatically an effective bomb or propellant. Purity, proportions, mixing, grain size, confinement, and the strength of the container all change what the mixture can do. Modern black powder is usually described as saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, but naming the ingredients is only the beginning. Saltpeter supplies oxygen to the reaction, charcoal provides fuel, sulfur helps the mixture ignite and burn. In an open pile, much of the energy escapes as flame, heat, smoke, and rapidly expanding gas. Enclose the mixture in a shell and pressure builds until the container fails. Place it behind a projectile inside a sufficiently strong tube and the gas seeks the easiest path forward. Early experimenters did not possess modern chemical theory, so every step depended on accumulated craft knowledge, refining ingredients, testing proportions, recognizing dangerous failures, and reproducing a result. The path from fire drug to firearm was therefore not one idea. It was the slow capture of pressure. By the 10th century, the surviving record moves decisively toward war. The History of Song, compiled later but drawing on earlier court records, reports that inventors presented fire arrows and fireballs to the imperial government between 970 and 1002. A court presentation does not prove mass deployment, and the term fire arrow does not always mean a self-propelled rocket. But it does prove something essential. Officials were evaluating gunpowder-related devices as military technology. The fire drug had crossed the threshold from hazardous experiment to state-sponsored weapon. The strongest early landmark arrived in 1044, when the Northern Song government completed the Wujing Zongyao, the complete essentials for the military classics. This enormous official compendium contains the earliest surviving complete formulas for military gunpowder. Its recipes were intended for incendiary balls, caltrop-like fireballs, and poisonous smoke devices, not for muskets. That difference is often treated as evidence of technological weakness. It should be read as evidence of technological sequence. Engineers first exploited gunpowder's ability to sustain fire and create heat, smoke, and confusion. Only later would they control its gases well enough to propel a projectile through a tube. The manual also sits inside a larger Song military system. Government arsenals supervised the manufacture of weapons, and historical research indicates that gunpowder and gunpowder devices were produced through official institutions and, in some places, local military workshops. That matters because a recipe on paper does not defend a city. Saltpeter and sulfur must be obtained, charcoal prepared, containers, fuses, arrows, and throwing equipment manufactured, finished charges kept dry, and soldiers instructed in handling a substance that could destroy its user as easily as its target. The Song state did not solve every one of these problems perfectly. But it did move gunpowder out of isolated experimentation and into administration, budgets, arsenals, and defensive planning. That is already military integration, even before the appearance of a true gun. To understand these early weapons, imagine a siege rather than an open field. Attackers approach beneath wooden screens, ladders, towers, and bridges. Defenders need to burn the machines, blind the crews, disrupt a concentrated assault, or make men hesitate at the foot of a wall. A gunpowder charge tied to an arrow could carry a fierce flame into dry material. A smoke device could conceal movement or make a confined position unbearable. A fireball thrown by hand or launched by a traction trebuchet could ignite equipment behind a protective screen. The value of these weapons lay not only in casualties, but in time, space, fear, and the destruction of siege machinery. The word rocket creates another trap. Chinese sources use terms that are often translated as fire arrow, but a fire arrow may be an ordinary arrow carrying an incendiary charge, a rocket-assisted arrow still launched from a bow, or a fully self-propelled rocket. Those are three different machines. Specialist research finds no secure evidence for self-launching weapon rockets as early as many popular timelines claim. The earliest relatively persuasive reference to a self-propelled Chinese rocket comes from 1272, and even that device appears to have been used for signaling. China was central to the development of rocketry, but historical credit becomes stronger, not weaker, when we stop forcing uncertain evidence into an attractive world's first. Part of the confusion comes from language. Medieval names often described an effect, fire, thunder, flying, smoke, rather than a standardized mechanical category. The same term could change meaning over time, while different regions could use several names for related devices. Even the character often translated as cannon might refer to a trebuchet, the missile thrown by it, or a later gunpowder weapon. Historians must therefore compare wording, date, illustration, archaeological context, and the physical action described. A dramatic name is not enough. Thunder does not automatically prove detonation, fire arrow does not automatically prove rocket propulsion, and fire lance does not automatically prove a bullet. The documents preserve the path of invention, but they preserve it through a vocabulary that was evolving alongside the machines. The decisive step toward the gun began with a weapon that was still mostly fire. The fire lance joined a tube of gunpowder to a long pole or spear. When ignited, the tube projected flame, hot material, smoke, and sometimes fragments over a short distance. Its range was limited, and early versions did not fire a single fitted bullet. But the concept was revolutionary. Combustion was being directed through a tube toward an enemy. A chaotic chemical reaction now had an axis. A record associated with the defense of Dan in 1132 describes more than 20 long bamboo fire lances prepared under the Song official Qinggui. They were to be held by 2 men and used when enemy siege bridges approached the walls. The account was written down decades after the event, so its details must be handled with care. Even with that limitation, it shows how the weapon fit a real tactical problem. The fire lance was not a poor substitute for a distant archer. It was a close defense tool designed for the moment when wood, rope, men, and machines crowded together beneath a wall. The fire lance did not evolve in a neat straight line. Cheap bamboo and paper tubes could remain useful even after metal barrels appeared, because they were lighter, easier to make, and adequate for particular defensive tasks. Some versions emphasized flame, others added fragments or pellets, still others lengthened the discharge or combined the tube with a spear point. Old and new designs could serve together for generations. This is common in military history. The arrival of one weapon rarely erases everything before it. Instead, armies test overlapping solutions until changes in cost, reliability, training, and tactics make one system dominant. The gun did not spring fully formed from the fire lance. It emerged from a family of experiments in which tubes, powder, flame, fragments, and projectiles were combined in different ways. A century later, the pressure of war had intensified. In 1232, Mongol forces besieged Kaifeng, and the Jin defenders used 2 weapons named in the dynastic history, the heaven-shaking thunder bomb and the flying fire lance. The bomb was described as an iron container filled with gunpowder and launched from the walls. The fire lance projected flame forward far enough to keep attackers from closing easily. These descriptions are not engineering blueprints, and claims that the blast could be heard for 100 li or burn through iron armor should not be accepted literally, but the underlying evidence, iron-cased explosive devices and directed fire weapons, is difficult to dismiss. Kaifeng does not prove that gunpowder decided the siege. It does not prove that every Jin soldier carried a firearm or that bows, crossbows, cavalry, and siege engines had become obsolete. What it proves is more important for our question. By the early 13th century, East Asian armies were not merely aware of gunpowder, they had developed named weapon types, tactical methods, and specialized containers for using it under battlefield conditions. The technology remained dangerous, inconsistent, and limited. But limited is not the same as unused, and not yet a cannon is not the same as not a weapon. Battlefield use also demanded discipline. A weapon that produced smoke and terror among the enemy could do the same among friendly troops if it ignited too early, blew back in the wind, or spread fire through its own stores. Fuses had to burn predictably, teams had to coordinate loading, carrying, aiming, and ignition. Commanders had to choose moments when a short-range effect justified the risk. Weather mattered. Damp powder weakened a charge, while dry timber and strong wind could turn a local fire into a wider disaster. These constraints help explain why gunpowder weapons entered armies alongside older arms instead of replacing them overnight. The technological challenge was not merely to make fire violent. It was to make violence controllable, repeatable, and useful to one side more than the other. The next transition appears in a song record dated to 1259. It describes a weapon called the Tuwokiang, the erupting fire lance. A large bamboo tube held gunpowder and something the text calls a ziku. After ignition, the flame ended and the ziku emerged with a report said to resemble a cannon. For the first time in this chain of evidence, a Chinese source clearly describes an object being expelled from a tube by the action of gunpowder. Fire was becoming propulsion. Was this the world's first gun? The answer depends on what we mean by gun and on what the mysterious ziku actually was. It may have been a wad, a packet of fragments, pellets, or another projectile-like load. The text does not give us a recovered specimen. If a firearm means any tube that uses gunpowder gases to expel a projectile, the erupting fire lance stands close to the threshold. If the definition requires a durable metal barrel and a clearly fitted projectile, it remains a proto-firearm. The honest conclusion is not less dramatic. Sometime in the 13th century, Chinese weapon makers crossed the conceptual boundary between directing flame and directing a projectile. Even after a projectile could be expelled, reliability remained the harder test. A useful firearm needed a charge strong enough to move its load but not so strong that it destroyed the tube. The projectile had to fit well enough to capture pressure, yet loosely enough to be loaded under field conditions. The weapon needed an ignition point, a stable way to aim, and a crew able to repeat the action while exposed to noise, smoke, weather, and enemy attacks. These requirements explain why historians hesitate to identify one sentence in one chronicle as the birth certificate of every later gun. The 1259 account records a crucial principle, not a complete mature system. Its importance lies precisely there. It catches the technology in motion, at the moment when the tube was no longer only carrying flame but had begun to control the movement of matter. Bamboo had made experimentation possible, but it also imposed a limit. A tube strong enough to contain greater pressure could transform more of gunpowder's rapid combustion into forward force. That required metal casting, thicker chambers around the powder, an opening for ignition, and some method of holding or mounting the weapon. The transition was not automatic. Too little confinement wasted energy, while too much pressure could rupture the barrel. Building a gun therefore meant coordinating chemistry, metallurgy, ammunition, and human handling. The invention was not one object, it was a system whose components had to survive one another. Archaeology finally gives us something the ambiguous words cannot: surviving metal barrels. One bronze hand cannon found in Heilongjiang is usually associated with fighting in the late 1280s, although the object itself carries no date and the connection remains contextual. Stronger evidence comes from Xanadu, the Mongol imperial city known in the West as Xanadu. A small bronze gun found there bears an inscription corresponding to 1298, along with a serial number and manufacturing information. It is the oldest surviving gun whose inscribed date is considered unequivocal. By the end of the 13th century, the question is no longer whether China possessed guns, but how widely and effectively different gun types were produced and used. The Xanadu inscription changes the quality of the argument. Texts can use unstable terms, and undated objects can be placed within ranges, but a manufacturing inscription fixes one gun to a particular administrative moment. Its number and official information suggest that it was not an isolated casting made by an unknown experimenter. We should not turn one serial number into proof of modern mass production, yet it points toward organized manufacture and record keeping. The object is also small, closer to a hand cannon than the enormous siege artillery that later dominates popular imagination. That scale supports an important comparison. Early Chinese development appears to have invested heavily in portable and relatively small guns, while later European warfare created especially strong incentives for much larger wall-breaking cannon. The gun existed in both worlds before either world possessed the perfected weapon systems of the early modern age. Gunpowder knowledge did not remain inside China. By the 13th century, formulas and related devices appear in the Islamic world and in Europe. Roger Bacon discussed a gunpowder-like mixture in 1267, while European canon are securely documented in the early 14th century. The Mongol conquests connected engineers, armies, captives, merchants, and information across enormous distances, so they probably accelerated the movement of gunpowder technology. But the evidence does not reveal one messenger, one caravan, or one battle that carried the complete secret west. Transmission was more likely a network of encounters, partial knowledge, adaptation, and independent experimentation. Once knowledge moved, it changed. Every region combined it with different metals, fortifications, armies, resources, and traditions of warfare. Europe did not simply receive a finished Chinese gun and improve it through a uniquely inventive culture. Nor did China freeze at the moment of invention. Chinese states continued to manufacture guns, bombs, rockets, mines, and incendiary weapons, while absorbing foreign designs when they proved useful. The history is not a relay race in which one civilization drops the baton and another carries it to the finish. It is a long argument between weapons and the problems armies needed them to solve. The dates themselves reveal why the transmission debate remains open. Europe knew a gunpowder-like composition by the time of Roger Bacon, but knowing that a mixture can make noise is not the same as possessing a gun. Clear European images and records of cannon appear decades later, around the 1320s. In the Islamic world, 13th century military writing contains sophisticated gunpowder recipes and devices, yet scholars continue to debate exactly when true firearms appeared there. The evidence does not move west in a perfectly ordered series of surviving documents. Archives disappear, terms shift, and technologies can travel faster than the texts that describe them. What remains strongest is the overall sequence. China preserves the earliest continuous development from incendiary mixtures to bombs, fire lances, projectile tubes, and metal guns. Other Eurasian traditions enter the surviving record later and then transform the technology in their own ways. By the late 15th century, many European guns had become longer, more powerful, easier to aim, and increasingly effective against stone fortifications. When Portuguese firearms reached the Chinese coast in the early 16th century, Ming officials recognized important advantages and began copying and adapting them. This later transfer is real, but it does not validate the myth with which we began. A technology can originate in one region, develop along several paths, and later return in a modified form. The printing press, the compass, the horse, and the stirrup all traveled through histories more complicated than national ownership. Gunpowder was no different. One explanation lies in the enemies armies faced. European rulers fought repeated wars against dense networks of stone castles and fortified cities, creating strong incentives for heavier wall-breaking artillery. Chinese armies also fought sieges, but they repeatedly confronted highly mobile forces along enormous northern and western frontiers. Against cavalry and steppe warfare, a massive bombard was less useful than mobile troops, bows, crossbows, smaller firearms, field defenses, and reliable logistics. Different military environments rewarded different investments. That is not technological destiny, but it helps explain why development could diverge without either side being irrational. Fortifications themselves became part of the technological contest. A powerful cannon was valuable only if it could be transported to a siege, supplied with powder and shot, positioned safely, and fired often enough to open a breach. When artillery improved, defenders answered with thicker walls, lower profiles, earthworks, angled defenses, and new methods of absorbing impact. Weapons changed architecture, and architecture pushed weapons to change again. China possessed immense fortified cities and conducted major sieges, but its construction traditions and strategic geography did not reproduce every European incentive in the same form. Meanwhile, Chinese military needs continued to reward portable firearms and flexible combinations of gunpowder and older weapons. The result was divergence, not absence, different balances between heavy artillery, handheld guns, traditional missile weapons, cavalry, engineering, and logistics. War frequency, state organization, metallurgy, taxation, commercial networks, and the design of fortifications also mattered. Historians disagree about how much weight each factor deserves. One influential interpretation argues that Chinese military innovation accelerated during periods of intense war and slowed during long periods of stability, while Europe's fragmented states maintained unusually sustained military competition. But no serious explanation can be reduced to the Chinese were peaceful, Confucians disliked weapons, or Europeans were simply more creative. Those slogans describe civilizations as personalities. History requires us to examine systems. The Ming response to foreign firearms is especially revealing. Recognizing an advantage in an imported weapon is not evidence that earlier generations were incapable of military thought. It is evidence that military institutions compare, copy, test, and adapt whenever circumstances permit. Chinese forces had already spent centuries combining gunpowder weapons with crossbows, cavalry, ships, walls, and field formations. European designs added new barrel forms, firing systems, and artillery possibilities to that existing experience. The result was not passive imitation, but selective incorporation into Chinese arsenals and tactical practice. Nor did European armies develop in isolation. They borrowed metals, techniques, specialists, and ideas through warfare and trade. The gunpowder age was created by circulation as well as invention. China began that recorded chain, but no civilization controlled everything that followed. So, did China invent gunpowder but fail to use it in war? No. Chinese experimenters discovered its properties. Chinese officials recorded military formulas. Song and Jin armies used incendiaries, smoke weapons, bombs, and fire lances. 13th century weapon makers used gunpowder to expel projectiles, and surviving metal guns confirmed the final transition. China did not merely invent an ingredient that Europe turned into a weapon. It created the earliest known gunpowder weapon tradition, and within that tradition, the gun itself emerged. The deeper lesson is that invention is rarely a single flash of genius. It is a chain of imperfect answers, an alchemical warning, a government recipe, a burning arrow, a bamboo tube, an iron bomb, a mysterious projectile, and finally a dated bronze gun. None of those objects contained the entire future. Together, they changed how human beings converted chemistry into power, and how states projected that power across walls, frontiers, and civilizations. But where would you draw the line? Was the gun invented when flame first entered a tube, when a projectile first emerged from bamboo, or only when a metal barrel survived the shot? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more evidence-based stories of weapons, warfare, and civilization, subscribe to Dragon Arsenal and explore the forgotten arsenal of ancient China.